Psalm 145, 3 through 18. Listen for God's word. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall praise your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. I will meditate on the glorious splendor of your majesty and on your wondrous works. Men shall speak of the might of your awesome acts, and I will declare your greatness. They shall utter the memory of your great goodness and shall sing of your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All your works shall praise you, O Lord, and your saints shall bless you. They shall speak of the glory of your kingdom and talk of your power, to make known to the sons of men his mighty acts and the glorious majesty of his kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations. The Lord upholds all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look expectantly to you, and you give them your food in due season. You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways, gracious in all his works. The Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. And now we'll turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 16 through 19. These are the words of Jesus. But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another, "We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Kids these days, right? We were in a bit of a hurry to get out the door, and as a general rule, we don't leave the house, no matter how long or short the trip is going to be, without a long list of necessities. We were making sure that there were wipes in the diaper bag, making sure we had both kids' blankies. The only thing that was missing was Dylan's sippy cup. So I sent him off with one job: go get your cup. Then we waited, and we waited. Feeling rushed and a little annoyed, I walked back to his room to find out what was taking so long. There he stood in the middle of his room, hardly looking around, and he announced, "I can't find it anywhere." Kids these days. He's only 3.5 years old, and I can already tell we're going to have to spend extra time teaching him about taking initiative, opening his eyes and looking around. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to teach him a lesson about putting forth a little effort to find what you're looking for. I took him with me, and we went through each room of the house, explaining the proper technique for locating something that's missing. "We're looking on the end tables in the den," I told him. "We don't see it there. So we're going to get down on the floor to make sure it didn't accidentally roll under the furniture." As we methodically go through each room in the house, with no success finding the cup, I'm getting more and more bothered that he probably left the cup in a store somewhere. Or worse yet, he might have chucked it out the window as we drove down the road. As we're looking for the cup, I began quizzing him. Where do you remember having it last? Where do you think you might have left it? When's the last time you rode with the windows down? We looked everywhere in the house, and I mean everywhere, and there was no sippy cup. I don't know if someone broke into the house and took it, or if Allison left it on top of the car and drove off. But one thing was absolutely certain. There was no cup in our house. So we returned to the kitchen, and I delivered the bad news to Allison, that I had confirmed that Dylan's cup no longer resided in our home. I shared some of my theories as to where it might be, but she didn't seem amused. She walked into the den, made her way over to the bookshelf at about Dylan's eye level, held up the cup that had obviously somehow just miraculously appeared, and stared me right in the eyes as she walked the cup over to Dylan. In my defense, how was I supposed to know to look on that particular shelf? That's where we keep books, not dishes. But I missed it, because obviously I wasn't really looking at what was really there. Maybe you've stood in front of the refrigerator and insisted that there's no more ketchup, only to be shown the full bottle in the door. Maybe you've searched and searched for your car keys to eventually end up learning that they've been in your back pocket the whole time. If you've ever felt the embarrassment of overlooking something right in front of your eyes, or been the one who has helped the unfortunate soul realize what they're overlooking, Jesus' words are for you. To what will I compare this generation? Jesus asks. In recent history, every new generation gets a name that's supposed to help us understand a little bit about the way they see and experience the world. The greatest generation is the name we gave to those who lived through the Great Depression and fought in World War II. They're said to value strong morals, hard work, and grit. We call the generation that lived through the threat of worldwide communism the silent generation. They valued stability and modesty. The next group is the baby boomers, who were characterized by a national optimism and prosperous consumerism. Then Generation X is known for rebellion, self-reliance, and an almost overall mistrust of institutional authority. Millennials are the generation that saw the creation of the internet and tend to be more community-minded and environmentally conscious. Gen Z, which would be today's teenagers, are still making their mark, but they're already known as the most depressed generation, but also the generation most likely to engage in social activism. Finally, kids born from 2013 on are being called Generation Alpha, denoting the hope of a new start with this generation. I know that's a little bit like a sociology lesson, but if you've ever looked into these generation titles, you've probably felt a little boxed in. To characterize every person from a generation in the same terms seems impersonal at best and insulting at worst. I'm from the same generation as Britney Spears and the creator of Facebook. I'm sure they're great people. I'm just not sure how much we have in common. When Jesus says, "To what will I compare this generation?" He's not looking to name a certain age group so that the older ones can blame them for everything, and the younger ones can make jokes about how out of touch they are. The way Jesus uses the term generation is to refer to the whole multitude of people inhabiting the earth at that particular time. He's talking about the very old and the very young, and everyone in between. To what will I compare the human population? Are they like a choir with many different voices joining together to make one beautiful sound? Are they like a well-oiled machine, each doing their part to work together to accomplish a task? Or maybe this would be a good time to use the analogy of a body, with each part contributing what it can for the good of the whole. Jesus didn't choose any of those images to describe the human race. Instead, he chose kids. Kids out in the streets, playing childish games, and then whining when others don't play right. Long before every kid had a screen to entertain them or a jump rope to skip, children would use their imaginations and recreate things that they had seen adults doing in their families. Two very popular children's games were to play wedding and to have a pretend funeral. If you're playing wedding, you'd play or sing the joyful music and expect everyone to join in the festivities. If you're playing funeral, you'd groan and cry loudly and expect everyone to pay their respects. If everyone played along, there was no problem. But if the other kids ignored the game, let the real fussing and pouting commence. So what's Jesus saying? What do these kids' games have to do with the whole human race? Well, I don't think he's accusing the people of playing games. If you spend any time around children, you know that play is serious business. So a kid complaining that someone else isn't participating is more than just dissatisfaction. In many ways, it's the expression of feeling like they have been completely abandoned. Children may not have the words to describe their feelings, but it's not hard for us to understand the perspective that no one cares about the things that matter most to us. Jesus compares the generation to children lamenting that it seems their concerns aren't important. Children that feel ignored, forgotten, even invisible. It's probably no wonder they felt that way. They were searching for clues that God had not abandoned them, and they just kept coming up short. John the Baptist was telling them to repent and prepare the way for the Lord, but he fit the mold more of a crazy man than a holy man of God. Then Jesus himself came along, but he didn't fit the mold either. He would eat and drink with sinners, do so many things that they knew God considered unclean. If only they thought God would just send them the simplest sign to let them know that he was with them. If only God would make his presence known to assure them that he cared. Well, Jesus was too kind to say it this way. But to put bluntly what he was saying, you are an oblivious generation. You're not seeing what's right in front of you. We can't even imagine going to a baptism event by the river with John, to a temple teaching with Jesus, then walking out and saying, God is nowhere to be found. Looking back on those days, we might get a little jealous and think, if only God was moving today like God was moving back then, I'd never have any doubts. And I would feel God's presence with me all the time. If that ever crosses our minds, Jesus has these strong words for us today. You are an oblivious generation. You're not seeing what is right in front of you. How many times are we overlooking what God is doing in our world? Because the way things are happening don't fit our mold of the way we think God should act. How many times are we walking right past God's action because we aren't really looking at what's there? We live in a generation that has gotten really great at pointing out what's going wrong and what's failing and why there's evidence all around us that God is not here. To what will we compare this generation? I don't think oblivious is a word that we want applied to us. Every one of us has a story to tell. A reason that we believe God is worthy of our hope. Some of us have endured health issues that God helped us through. Others of us have journeyed through difficult relationships or challenges in our lives that we could have only withstood with God by our side. Still others of us make it through each day only because of the grace that we've experienced through the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. When we think about the things that God has done in our lives, we're reminded that we are living, breathing evidence that God is very much at work in this world. And yet there is still a prevalent question of whether God is paying attention. Everything I told Dylan about the proper techniques to find his juice cup were right. I was giving him the method to eliminate all the places his cup was not. And yet at the end of our search, he was still thirsty. In that moment, he didn't care that much about how many hundreds of times I had found the cup that I was looking for using my techniques. Allison, on the other hand, didn't think of all the places the cup should be. She helped him look for where it was. People of God, let us pay attention to the cries of our neighbors as they search for meaning and purpose, reassurance and hope. We won't settle for being described as a generation oblivious to the movement of God. No, we will see the world as it is and walk alongside our brothers and sisters, doing our part to define a generation as those who declare the mighty works of God.